The gate had been called twice. Nobody noticed the boy was alone. He was sitting on the floor. Not on a chair, not leaning against a wall on the actual floor, right there between two rows of plastic airport seats at Gate 34, Terminal B, O'Hare International. The carpet was that particular shade of gray that airports choose because it hides everything and shows nothing. His sneakers were untied. Both of them. The laces just lying there like they had given up. His backpack was shaped like a turtle, green. A little deflated on one side, where the zipper had been forced too many times by small hands that hadn't quite figured out zippers yet. He had a juice box. Apple. The small kind, 200 milliliters, the kind packed into school lunches in the morning when someone is still half asleep. He had been working at the straw for a while, tilting the box, squeezing the sides, frowning at it with the full concentrated seriousness of a person confronting a real problem. The straw had a crack near the base. He hadn't found it yet. He wasn't crying. That was the thing. That was the detail that made it hard to look away. He wasn't crying, wasn't searching the crowd with that wide-eyed animal panic of a lost child. He was just sitting there, quiet, watching the river of strangers move past him the way you watch rain from a window. Patient, like he had already made peace with the fact that the world was large and loud and not particularly concerned with him right now. He looked about 5 years old, maybe just turned 6. 22 feet away, Dominic Verse had stopped walking. He had not planned to stop. He had a flight. He had a private terminal on the other side of the airport, a car on the tarmac, 4 men behind him in formation, and a phone call that had been going for 9 minutes with a logistics coordinator named Pavel who was explaining, in the exhausted, over-detailed way of someone who understands that silence from this particular man is a very bad sign, why a shipping container had gone missing somewhere between Marseille and Miami. Dominic had stopped anyway. His phone was still at his ear. He was looking at the boy. The boy looked up, not with hope, not with the desperate relief of a child who had been looking for someone and finally found them. He looked up the way children look at strangers, careful, measuring, and then something shifted in his face. Not recognition, exactly. More like the particular comfort of a face that stayed still when everything else was moving. The boy held up the juice box. "It's broken," he said, "the straw part. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Tell me in the comments. Whether it is late at night and the house is quiet, or you're on your lunch break, or you have your earphones in on a bus somewhere in the world, I want to know. Because the people who find these stories always find them for a reason, and I want to hear yours. And if nobody has told you yet today, you are welcome here. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on the bell. Because what happens in this story between a broken juice box and a lonely man and a little boy on an airport floor, it's going to stay with you. Now, back to Gate 34. Dominic Verse ended the phone call without saying goodbye. Pavel, the logistics coordinator, would spend the next 4 hours convinced he was already dead. He was not. Dominic simply had more important things to attend to. He crouched down, not stood over the boy with that particular towering adult energy that made small children feel like problems to be managed. He crouched, all the way down, his expensive coat pooled on the carpet. His eyes went level with the boy's. He took the juice box, turned it slowly in his fingers until the crack in the straw caught the terminal light. He pressed his thumb over it, adjusted the angle, handed it back. "Try now," he said. The boy tried. Apple juice moved up the straw. The boy's whole face opened up like a window. "It worked," he said, the absolute certainty of someone witnessing something genuinely miraculous. "It worked," Dominic said. A pause. The airport kept being an airport around them. An announcement about Denver. A family with a stroller the size of a small vehicle. Somewhere a child much louder than this one was screaming about something. One of Dominic's men, a man named Caruso who had been beside him for 11 years and had watched him do things that most people would not recover from witnessing, stood 15 feet back and watched his employer crouched on an airport carpet helping a small boy with a juice box. Caruso was not a sentimental man, but something happened in his chest in that moment that he would not be able to explain for several days. The boy looked at Dominic with brown eyes that were entirely steady, entirely serious. "Are you lost too?" he asked. Dominic did not answer. He looked at the boy, at the untied laces, at the turtle backpack, at the careful way the boy held the juice box with both hands, like something important, like something he had been trusted with. "What's your name?" Dominic asked. "Mateo," the boy said. "My mom calls me Tio, but my grandma calls me Mateo, so at school, I don't know which one to say, so I just wait and see what the teacher says first." "Where is your mother, Mateo?" The boy pointed in the direction of approximately half the airport. "She went to get my bag. She said stay here and don't move." He looked down at his juice box. "I stayed, I didn't move." "How long has she been gone?" Tio thought about this with tremendous gravity. "3 juice boxes," he said, "but the last one was broken, so I don't know if that counts as a whole one." Dominic Verse was 53 years old. Let me tell you what that meant. It meant he had been inside rooms where the temperature changed when he walked in. It meant he had sat across tables from men who controlled governments and had not blinked. It meant he had built, from the broken bones of his father's failed construction business, a network that moved things across 17 states and 4 international ports, and employed more people than most people ever met in a lifetime. He was described in the circles where his name was known as precise, remorseless, unknowable. He had not had a real conversation with a child in 9 years. The last child he had spoken to at length had brown eyes. She had a theory, 17 of them actually, about why clouds changed shape depending on the time of day. She used to explain things to him at the dinner table with the patient enthusiasm of someone who understood that adults were simply children who had stopped paying attention and needed to be reminded. She tilted her head when she was thinking, exactly like her mother. She was 7 years old the last time. He was on a plane to Zurich. He was always on a plane somewhere. Her name was Lucia. By the time he landed, there was nothing to come home to. 9 years. He looked at Mateo's brown eyes. 3 juice boxes is a long time, Dominic said. "I know," Tio said. "I saved the last one because I was worried." A beat. "Are you somebody's dad?" The question arrived like a stone dropped into still water. Dominic felt the ripple of it in his chest before he could stop himself. "I was," he said very quietly. Tio looked at him for a long moment, the way children looked at things they were deciding whether to ask more about. He decided not to ask more. Instead, he held out the juice box. "You can have some if you want," he said, "since you fixed it." Dominic looked at the juice box. At this small person offering him the only thing he had, which was very little, which was everything. "Keep it," Dominic said. "You earned it." Elena Conti had been running for 11 minutes. She knew it was 11 because she had checked her phone the second she left Tio at the gate and told herself 5 minutes, just 5. The bag is right there on the carousel, back in 5. And then the carousel had stopped. A mechanical fault. The airport staff managing it with the particular brand of helpful incompetence that suggested this happened regularly and had never once been resolved quickly. She was 31 years old. Dark hair pulled back in a way that had been neat at 6 that morning, which felt like a different era. She had a carry-on over one shoulder and her phone in her hand, and she was moving through Terminal B at a speed that made other travelers step out of her way without fully understanding why. She had been a flight nurse for 6 years. Before that, 2 years in a Chicago trauma center. She had a resting pulse rate that most people would consider aspirational. She could put an IV line into a moving target in the back of a turbulent aircraft while talking someone through their breathing with a calm that she had trained into herself like a second language. She was not, by nature, a panicking person. Tio was not at gate 34. She stood in the middle of the gate and felt the floor shift. She turned a full circle. She checked under the seats, which even as she did it she understood was not rational. Tio was not under a seat, but panic doesn't wait for rationality. Panic operates on the image of a green turtle backpack and 2 untied laces and a small person who had said, "I'll stay, Mom. I'll stay right here." She opened her mouth. "Ma'am." A large man appeared at her left shoulder. Dark suit, calm hands. the particular stillness of someone who was choosing, deliberately, not to be alarming. "Your son is fine," he said. "He's with someone 40 feet, 2 o'clock." Elena turned. Tio was still on the floor, still holding his juice box, but not alone. Beside him, also on the floor, coat and everything, was a man, a large man, a man who looked like he had not sat on a floor voluntarily in a very long time and had done so anyway. He was listening to Tio with the kind of attention, full, unhurried, complete, that most adults reserved for things they considered important. Phone calls, meetings, negotiations. Tio was talking with one hand, the juice box in the other, explaining something with the sweeping arm gesture he used for subjects of great personal significance. Usually dinosaurs, sometimes Gerald. Elena walked toward them. She was 3 feet away when the man looked up. His eyes were gray, very still. The kind of still that doesn't come from peace, she would think about this later, but from long practice at holding something in. He looked at her the way people looked at a room when they entered it, the rapid, quiet cataloging of everything present, threat assessment so practiced it had become involuntary. Then it stopped, and he just looked at her. He stood, carefully, not quickly, like someone who had learned at some point that sudden movements frightened people. "He's yours," the man said. "He's mine," Elena said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She was looking at Tio, who was looking up at her with the expression of a child who has been completely fine the entire time and is mildly puzzled by the emotions on her face. "Mom," Tio said, "he fixed my juice box, and he sat on the floor. Grown-ups don't usually sit on the floor." "No," Elena said, "they don't." She looked at the man. 6 years in emergency medicine had made her very good at reading what wasn't being said. She read it now. He was not dangerous to her son. She knew that the way she knew a heartbeat was stable, not from evidence, from something more immediate than evidence. But there was something else. Something in the way he looked at Tio, not with the easy warmth of a kind stranger who had helped for a moment and was ready to move on. With something that had been stored somewhere airless for a long time, and had, in the last 20 minutes, been quietly, unexpectedly opened. "Thank you," she said. "He stayed where you told him," the man said. "Good kid." "He's the best kid," Elena said. The rawness in her own voice surprised her. Tio tugged the man's sleeve. "This is my mom," he announced. "Her name is Elena, but I call her Mom. What do I call you?" The man looked at Tio. "Dominic," he said. Tio tried the word carefully. "Dominic, do you have a nickname? Because I have 2 names and it's kind of a lot." "No nickname," Dominic said. Tio nodded, satisfied. "That's simpler," he said. The bag was eventually recovered from the carousel. An apologetic staff member delivered an apology that Elena accepted with the grace of someone who had already used all their frustration on things that mattered. She and Tio were walking toward the exit when Caruso reappeared. "Mr. Verse asks if you have ground transportation arranged." Elena stopped. "Mr. Verse?" "Yes, ma'am." She looked back. Dominic was 30 feet away, not watching her directly, phone in hand, not raised to his ear. "We're taking a cab," she said. "Mr. Verse would like to offer his car. No obligation." "Tell him we're fine." The message was relayed. Dominic received it, nodded, turned away, walked 4 steps. Stopped. Turned back. Walked toward her himself. "Where are you going?" Direct, not pushy. The question of someone who spent a life moving straight to the point because everything else cost too much time. "Wicker Park," Elena said. "My car goes through Wicker Park." "I'm sure it does." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the ghost of the memory of one. "The boy is tired," he said. "He's been holding that juice box for 40 minutes. He needs a car seat, not a cab." Elena looked at Tio, who was in fact asleep standing up against her hip, listing slightly to the left under the weight of Stephen the turtle backpack. "You have a car seat," she said. "I will in 8 minutes." She stared at him. "You'll have a car seat in 8 minutes." "My assistant is resourceful." It arrived in 7. installed in the back of a black armored SUV by a driver who had clearly done this before. Right size. Correct weight rating. Alina stood on the curb and looked at the car, and then at this man, and then at her sleeping son, and made the decision that women make sometimes, not from logic exactly, but from something older and more honest than logic. She got in. The drive took 41 minutes. Tio slept through all of them, head at the impossible angle children achieved in sleep, mouth slightly open, turtle backpack in his lap, entirely and completely himself in the way that sleeping children were. Just a small human being in the middle of the world with absolutely no defenses up and no idea they needed any. Dominic sat in the front passenger seat. Alina sat in the back beside Tio. 15 minutes of quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that meant two people were each doing something private, processing, settling. The city rose around them outside the tinted windows. Industrial giving way to neighborhoods. Neighborhoods getting warmer, more particular, more Chicago. He talks a lot, Dominic said, not turning. Constantly, Alina said. About dinosaurs and a fire truck. Gerald has been part of our family for about 8 months. A pause. His father, Dominic said, the shape of the real question underneath it. 3 years gone, Alina said. His choice. Silence. Tio doesn't know what he's missing, she added, which is either the saddest thing or the most fortunate, depending on the day. More silence, the kind that meant something was being considered. He asked me, Dominic said, and his voice had dropped slightly, something different in it now, if I was lost too. Alina looked at the back of his head, the set of his shoulders. What did you say? Nothing. Are you? He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly. I had a daughter, 9 years ago. She was 7. The past tense arrived in the car like a change in pressure. Alina felt it before she fully heard it. She didn't say she was sorry. She had held enough dying hands to know that sorry rarely reached the place where the pain actually lived. She waited. She used to explain things, he said. Everything. She had 17 theories about clouds, why they changed shape, why some days they looked like animals and other days like nothing at all. A long pause. I was always somewhere else. I kept thinking I'd hear the theories when I got back. There was always another trip, another meeting. Another reason the thing in front of me was more urgent than the person waiting at home. His voice was completely level. That was the most heartbreaking part of it. I was on a plane to Zurich. Alina looked at Tio sleeping in his car seat, at his small hands loose in his lap, at the juice box still somehow in his grip. Her name was Lucia, Dominic said. And then he turned back to the window, and Alina understood entirely that this was the most he had said about it to anyone in a very long time, possibly ever. The rest of the drive they didn't speak. But the silence was different now. It had been opened up, made larger. The kind of silence that two people shared when they had stopped pretending they weren't both carrying something. He walked them to the door of her building. Tio, awake now and indignant about it, had a brief and serious conversation with Dominic that Alina couldn't fully hear, but which ended with Tio shaking Dominic's hand with both of his, the ceremonial grip he reserved for people he had decided were important. Dominic crouched down, level with Tio's eyes. They looked at each other, the 53-year-old man who controlled things most people would not survive knowing about, and the 5-year-old boy with the untied shoes and the turtle backpack, and something passed between them that Alina did not have a name for and did not need one. Dominic stood, nodded at Alina once, walked back to the car. He did not look back. Alina stood on the steps with Tio's hand warm in hers and watched the black SUV until it turned the corner and was gone. Tio leaned against her leg. He's sad, Tio said. Yes, baby. Like sad, or just regular sad. Alina looked at the empty corner. Sad. Did he lose something? Yes. Tio was quiet for a moment. Did he lose it a long time ago? A long time ago. Sometimes, Tio said, in the thoughtful voice he used when he was working something out, when I lose Stephen, I think he's gone forever, but he's always somewhere. He's just waiting to be found. He looked up at her. Maybe Dominic's thing is like that, just waiting. Elena looked down at her son, at his absolute certainty, at the clean, undefended logic of him. Maybe, she said. She picked him up, turtle backpack and all, and carried him inside, and he was asleep again before the second-floor landing, his breath warm against her neck, his weight the most real thing in the world, and she stood in the hallway outside their apartment for a long moment just holding him. Not moving. Just holding him and thinking about 17 theories and a plane to Zurich and the particular cruelty of always having somewhere else to be. 4 days later, a package arrived at the building's front desk. No card, brown paper plain, inside a juice box apple 200 milliliters, and beneath it a book, hardcover beautifully made. The Cloud Collector's Handbook. And inside the cover, in handwriting that was careful and exact in the way that suggested the person had learned to be precise about everything, a single line. For Matteo, for the theories. Elena sat with that book in her kitchen for a long time. She called the front desk. No contact information had been left. She sat with it anyway. She saw him again, 11 days later. The coffee shop on Milwaukee Avenue, the one she went to Thursday mornings before Tio's school drop-off, the one with mismatched chairs and a barista who had been misspelling her name for 2 years in a way that had become something she would genuinely miss if it stopped. She had her laptop open, a schedule to file, a coffee going cold because she had been reading something and forgotten to drink it. Dominic was at a table by the window. Alone, no security visible, no phone raised. A newspaper, actual paper, folded in his hands. He looked in the gray Thursday morning light like a person rather than a presence. Still contained, still carrying that particular quality of stillness, but sitting in a coffee shop with a newspaper like someone who had given himself permission to be somewhere unremarkable for a moment. He saw her, he didn't look away. She picked up her cold coffee and her laptop and walked to his table and sat down across from him without asking. He looked at that like it interested him. The Cloud book, she said. He mentioned 17 theories, Dominic said. It seemed necessary. You knew I came here. You mentioned it in the car. Tio's school is 2 blocks away, Thursday mornings. He said it simply, no apology, no deflection. I remember everything. It's not always useful. Elena looked at him. Why are you here, Dominic? He looked at the table for a moment, then at her. He asked me if I was lost, he said. I've been thinking about what the honest answer was. And the honest answer is yes, 9 years. He turned the newspaper over in his hands without reading it. When you're in the dark long enough, you stop registering it as dark. You stop believing that light is something that still applies to you. You build things, you run things, you make things happen, and none of it costs you anything because you have already decided that nothing is allowed to cost you anything. You've closed all the accounts. A pause. And then a small boy on an airport floor asks you one question, and you realize you have been wrong about several fundamental things. The coffee shop hummed, rain on the windows. The barista misspelled another name. Tio does that, Elena said quietly. He just asks the actual question. He hasn't learned yet that you're not supposed to. I hope he never learns it. She looked at him for a long time. This man, this careful, controlled, genuinely dangerous man who had bought a Cloud book and written one sentence in it and left it without a name. Come for dinner, she said. He looked at her. Pasta, she said. A 6-year-old who will explain Gerald the fire truck to you in more detail than you thought possible. Nothing complicated. Just come. That's not a small offer, he said. I know what it is. She wrapped her hands around her cold coffee. Come anyway. He came on a Saturday. He brought apple juice, 12 boxes, which was objectively too many and which Tio received with the reverence of someone being presented with treasure, which in a very real sense he was. Dominic wore a dark sweater instead of his coat and jacket. It was, Elena would later think, the equivalent of arriving somewhere unarmored. A choice so small most people wouldn't notice. She noticed. Dinner was pasta. Tio had supervised the cheese quantities with great personal involvement. Dominic ate 2 full plates with an expression of faint surprise, like a man who had forgotten that food could taste like something when you ate it in the right kind of room. Tio explained Gerald. He explained the 17 cloud theories, 3 of which he had clearly invented since the book arrived, and which he had incorporated seamlessly into the existing canon. He explained Stephen the Turtle Backpack's complete personal history, including a traumatic incident involving a school bus that he described in vivid detail. He asked Dominic if he had a backpack. Dominic said he had a briefcase. Tio found this acceptable, but noted with some concern that briefcases did not float, which was a significant practical limitation he felt Dominic should consider addressing. Dominic listened to all of it, not politely. Actually listened, the way he had listened at gate 34, with the full weight of his attention, the kind that made you feel that what you were saying was the only thing happening in the world right now. At 7:45, Alina took Tio to bed. She was gone 12 minutes. When she came back, Dominic was standing at the kitchen window. On the table, next to the dinner plates, was a juice box, the original one, cracked straw still in it. She had kept it in a drawer near the sink. She had not examined why she had kept it. He had found it and set it on the table and was standing at the window looking at the city. He kept it, Dominic said. Tio keeps everything connected to a story, Alina said. He says everything is evidence. Evidence of what? That things happened. She sat at the table, picked up the juice box, turned it over in her hands, such a small broken thing that had somehow become the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for. My husband left when Tio was 2, she said. He said he hadn't understood what he was agreeing to. She set the juice box down. I was very careful after that, about what I let matter, about what I let Tio attach himself to, because he attaches completely. He goes all in on everything, every person, everything he loves. And I couldn't stand the thought of something being ripped away from something he had given his whole self to. Dominic turned from the window. So I kept everything small, Alina said. Kept the circle tight, told myself that was protecting him. She looked at the juice box. But I think I was protecting myself. Dominic came and sat down across from her, as he had sat at the coffee shop. As he would, she somehow already knew, sit across from her in many rooms after this. I'm not a simple man, he said. I know. You know the surface of it. Tell me the rest. He was quiet long enough that the city outside continued its indifferent night business. Traffic, something on the elevated train, a distant siren traveling away. After Lucia, he said, I decided there were no more limits. I told myself I had nothing left worth protecting, so nothing could be used against me. So I became the kind of man who nothing could be used against. He looked at his hands on the table. I was right for a long time. I stopped recognizing myself and I decided that was fine. That recognition was for people who still had something to lose. And now, she asked. And now, he said, a boy asked me if I was lost and I couldn't answer him. And I realized that not being able to answer is its own kind of answer. He placed his hand on the table beside hers. Not on it, beside it. The gesture of a man who had learned the hard way the difference between taking and asking. Alina turned her hand over. It was not a simple thing, and it did not move quickly, and there were nights when the full weight of what Dominic was, and had done and continued to do settled into the room between them, and neither of them looked away from it. Those were hard nights, important nights, the kind that either broke things or made them honest, and they were becoming, slowly, something honest. Caruso noticed things. He was not a man who spoke about what he noticed, but he cataloged it privately, the way loyal people cataloged the people they served. He noticed Dominic leaving a specific time on Tuesdays and Fridays. He noticed a small plastic dinosaur had appeared in his coat pocket, placed there one afternoon by Tio with the formal gravity of a significant gift, described as a backup in case Gerald was unavailable. He noticed once, on a phone call that went longer than expected and ended with a piece of unexpected good news, that Dominic laughed. Not the brief, controlled acknowledgement of something mildly amusing. The real kind. That started in the chest and came out without permission. Caruso kept all of this to himself, but he kept it. Tio, meanwhile, absorbed Dominic the way he absorbed everything he decided was his, completely and without reservation. He showed him the full archive of Stephen's history. He briefed him extensively on Gerald. He added him to the crayon drawing on the fridge, a large figure in a dark coat standing beside a smaller version of Alina, and an even smaller version of himself, and a green shape that was either a dinosaur or Gerald. The perspective made it genuinely difficult to determine. Above them, in the uneven, determined handwriting of someone who has recently learned that letters were how you kept things. My family. One Saturday afternoon in autumn, Tio looked up from a cloud theory he had been refining and asked Dominic, with complete seriousness, whether he was still getting found. Dominic looked at the drawing on the refrigerator. He thought about gate 34 and a cracked straw and a question he hadn't been able to answer. He thought about Lucia and 17 theories he never heard. He thought about a woman who had turned her hand over on a kitchen table not because he deserved it, but because she had decided some things were worth the risk of mattering. He thought about the specific and irreplaceable weight of being drawn onto a refrigerator in crayon. Yes, he said, I think I'm getting found. Tio nodded, satisfied in the way of someone whose theory has been confirmed. Stephen says it's going well, he said. Tell Stephen thank you, Dominic said. You can tell him yourself, Tio said, with some surprise at having to point this out. He's right there. On a Sunday morning in March, light coming in low through the kitchen window the way March light did in Chicago, slanted and a little tentative, like it wasn't sure yet if spring was actually happening, Dominic stood at the kitchen counter making coffee. He knew where everything was kept. He had been learning where everything was kept for months now, and it had become, quietly, without ceremony, one of the most valuable kinds of knowledge he possessed. Tio was at the table in his pajamas having a private conversation with Stephen. The tone was serious. Whatever they were discussing, it mattered. On the refrigerator, held with a magnet shaped like the state of Illinois, was the drawing. The figures in their dark coat and their regular height and their very small height. The unidentified green shape. And above them, in the handwriting of someone who had learned that letters were how you kept things, how you proved they were real. My family. Dominic looked at that drawing every morning he was here. He looked at it now. He thought about a man who had been on a plane to Zurich, who had been on a plane to 100 places, who had always had somewhere more urgent to be than wherever he was, something more important to attend to than the person in front of him, who had structured an entire life around the principle that presence was a luxury and everything could wait, who had been so thoroughly wrong about this that, by the time he understood it, there was nothing left to correct it with. He thought about 17 theories, about clouds that nobody had ever heard. He thought about a boy on an airport floor, asking a stranger the truest question anyone had asked him in 9 years. Are you lost too? Alina came in from the hallway, her hair loose, her eyes still carrying the soft unguardedness of someone who had just woken up and had not yet put anything back in its careful place. She looked at him the way she looked at him now, with the full, honest weight of someone who had seen the entire shape of a thing and chosen it anyway, not the cleaned-up version, not the parts he would have chosen to show her, all of it, and chosen it. Coffee's ready, he said. It smells good, she said. Tio looked up from his conversation with Stephen. Dominic, he said, in the voice he used for things of significance. Stephen wants to know if you're still getting found. Dominic looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, at the 3 figures in crayon, at his own shape, rendered in the hand of a child who had never learned to be careful about who he included, who asked strangers if they were lost and meant it, who shook hands with both of his and kept juice boxes in drawers as evidence that things happened. Yes, Dominic said. Tell Stephen I'm still getting found. Tio relayed this to Stephen with appropriate solemnity. Stephen appeared to receive it well. Alina poured 2 coffees. She handed him one. Their hands touched, briefly, the ordinary miracle of it. Outside, Chicago was doing its Sunday morning things. The light was getting stronger. Somewhere on the block, a dog was being walked by someone who had not yet had their coffee and was managing anyway. The elevated train ran its route in the distance, carrying people from where they had been to where they were going. On the refrigerator, the drawing held its place, the Illinois magnet doing its small, patient work. A green turtle backpack sat on a chair at the table. A plastic dinosaur was on the windowsill, standing guard. 12 juice boxes, most of them still there, were stacked with real dedication in the cabinet above the sink. It was not the life Dominic Verse had built or planned or would have predicted for himself. It bore no resemblance to the life he had constructed after Lucia, the controlled, sealed, deliberately lightless life of a man who had decided that loss was simply the cost of caring and had therefore stopped caring and called it strength. It was something entirely different from strength. It was something much harder than strength. It was a child on an airport floor who asked a stranger one honest question. It was a cracked straw and apple juice, and a woman who turned her hand over on a kitchen table. It was 17 cloud theories, and a fire truck named Gerald, and a crayon drawing that said my family and meant it. It was, without any competition, the best thing that had ever found him. And he was, every day, in every ordinary, unremarkable moment of it, choosing not to be somewhere else. You know what gets me about this story? It didn't start with something enormous. It started with a broken straw. That's how the real ones always start. Not with grand gestures or perfect moments, with something small and broken and a person who stopped when everyone else kept walking. We spend so much time in transit, between gates, between places, between the person we used to be and the person we haven't figured out how to become yet. And most of us walk past an awful lot of people on that floor who are quietly, patiently, just a little bit lost. What would happen if we stopped? If this story found something in you today, please press like so it can find someone else who needs it. Share it with someone who is in the middle of a long transit right now. And subscribe and turn the bell on because the stories coming next, they will not leave you the same way they found you. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me which moment in this story hit you hardest. Tell me if you've ever been the boy on the floor or the man who stopped. Rate this story on a scale of 10. We read every single one, every comment, because your words carry weight and you deserve to know that. Good health, peaceful days, and the very best kind of finding to all of you watching. We'll see you in the next one.